A lot of people have been coming out on War Thunder and various things like Reddit and YouTube, basically talking about how they think that the A-10 is going to perform. A lot of people have shown very critic, points of where it's going to enter the game, mostly in a ground realistic sense of the way. I personally felt like I needed to put my mark on the subject, considering the fact that I am a proponent. I am excited for the A10. I wasn't one of the leading people asking for it to come to the game. I'll be honest in that respect. But generally, when it comes to the game, I feel frankly I can speak about attackers in the game, considering that is largely one of my major assets that I would prefer to fly, as it is one of my major money incomes. But I feel that I should explain that I think that people really have a very bad view of the A10, and I think that's been over the previous videos people have been putting up over the last couple, I could say up to the last year. People have been very critical of the A10 historically, and I think even when its feature in the game is on the line, they're already calling it a no factor. So I want to speak to it in the performance of the air realistic and the ground realistic perspectives, as those will largely be the game modes that it will be facing within the community. Um, as for air realistic, I feel that when they add the A10, it's going to immediately run into the situation that it's going to be spammed. It's going to be flavor of the month for a while because people are going to want to fly the A10, and it's going to come down to the BR at the end of the day. And that's one of the big issues. We'll cover that as a whole at the end. But people are going to spam the A10. Supposedly, they think that the A10 is going to come out around 9.7. I think minimalistically, it'll come out to 10.0. I'll be surprised if it goes to 9.7. It will help out the A10 in the initial stages, but as more dedicated people go to fly the A10 and it doesn't clog the matchmaker, it's going to be minimalistically 10.0, maximum 10.3. And I know that's a very surprising thing to say, considering aircraft like the A7D and the A7E lack the ground ordnance slash the missiles that the A10 does, and especially the countermeasures, as we saw on the second dev server. But I think people need to realize that the situation for attackers in the game is drastically different than we could say maybe a patch or two patches ago. Currently, top tier attackers are at the worst stage in the game. I can no longer fly the A7 series with payload in a ground or in an air realistic match, as the takeoff time and the time it takes me to fly to the target is so long that by that time the game has ended in favor of either team, and I can no longer engage in the objective. I know people's simple responses don't play attackers, but it's a part of the game. There's a reason to have it there. There's a reason to play it. But I feel that with the BRs being the way that they are and the air spawns the way that they are, I think that they're likely going to look at editing the A7D and A7E to modify their BR to properly put them in an environment that will suit their ability. I think that the A10 largely is getting criticized for the fact that mainly the ground engagement is what's going to screw it over when it comes to the ground forces game mode. But I have heard people criticize the A7 in a limited degree when it comes to the ability to survive in an air realistic match. I think that the proponents for it are definitely there to say it's not going to perform as well. The thrust is very good, but it will definitely not control a dogfight engagement. It does not have the thrust to dogfight, it has the thrust to survive. That is a key thing. Now, when it comes to enduring confrontation maps for the air realistic, where the maps are so vastly massive, I feel that they need to edit the maps so that way they either provide an air spawn for the attackers regardless of the rank, or they need to provide an alternate airfield for the attackers to launch from to engage ground targets. I do not think it is currently appropriate that the A-10 and the A-7 should have to engage in a circumstance where they have to fly for 15 minutes to get to a target that will pretty much on the tip of the hat probably kill them instantly with the way that the AA set up in those game modes. But I feel like that deserves the video in itself. Largely, that's all I have to say about the air realistic side of the fence. Speaking to the ground realistic side of the fence, yes, of course, Tunguska, of course, Ito 90, of course, those things are going to decimate aircraft. It's always been the case in the game. Now, circumstantially, though, if I was given an opportunity to choose a different aircraft or any aircraft, I think the A-10 would be the better bet. Now, I can't speak for certain when it comes to the munitions. The AGM-65A/B versus the D is something that is still a question mark in my mind. We never got to experience the AGM-65 Delta. I know that it has a different seeker system. It's going to be pure infrared. I think that, or in the thermal sense, it'll look for thermal signature. Let's keep that straight. It will engage in that respect. And then obviously it's going to have various other ordnance with it. The countermeasures are sufficient, although optically guided SAMs won't largely care about that. That will give them a brief opportunity to break the lock when it comes to those systems. At the end of the day, the hand-guided, operator is going to try and hit you with a, mouse-guided missile. Now, the fact is the A-10 at top tier is the only aircraft with dual engine redundancy that is predominantly a ground attacker. Like, I can't think of any other ground attackers currently at top tier that have, double engines. And especially engines that are isolated from each other as much as the A-10s are. Yeah, you might argue a Phantom, but the Phantom, largely if one engine goes, the other engine's likely not very far behind it because of the sheer distance between the two of them is so minimalistic that likely the other engine's right behind it in the phase to die. But speaking to the A-10 and what it's going to provide for the game, I can't speak to where it's going to be BR-wise. And like I said early on in the video, this is where things get really spicy, is this BR situation. At what BR can you put the A-10 where it can appropriately manage itself in air realistic so it doesn't club planes below it or doesn't get, annihilated by planes above it to the extent that, would be excessive? Because right now I can't tell you what's excessive anymore with the way the new, takeoff, system is for the attackers at top tier. And most definitely, it's going to be a very, very a big question mark for ground realistic. I can't see the A-10 not being in a match where the SAM is at the BR with it, because I don't think a standard AA system like a Gepard or a Shulka can exist in the game versus something like an AGM-65 Delta. Yeah, they can fire smoke off and all that. Yeah, they can probably shoot the AGM-65 out of the air. But still, I do not see how they can survive in that environment, as that would be largely a positive engagement for the A-10. I don't think that there is going to be a BR for it to be at 9.7. Like I said, I think that is a way too low of a BR. And I think people have largely thought that the A-10 is going to be either cleaning house at top, or at the top of the spectrum, not the BR field, but the top of the spectrum, of reality, versus people that are saying it has no chance in the game. Because the sheer ordnance, if the A-10 is allowed to display its ordnance on the field, it's going to clean house. And that's not even talking about the gun. Largely, people have been critical of the gun. I disagree. The gun is going to do a lot of maiming. The biggest criticism I have against the MiG 27 when it comes to ground forces is how little the ammo is on the gun. With the A-10, it's going to have the ability to sit there and actually display the ammo and the penetration. It might not outright kill vehicles because of the armor protection, but it does not matter. If you can maim a vehicle to the point that it can no longer move, that vehicle is largely out of the engagement. Its position has been given away. It's been immobilized. It's been made vulnerable to another ground attack pass. I think people don't understand that. They think that everything's decided on one pass. And circumstantially, that might be right with the SAM system, but with the absence of SAMs or AA in the game, during the moment that an A-10 pulls up over the ground forces match, I think the guy in the A-10 is going to have a good he's going to have a good game. Let's be honest. He's going to own the sky. So I think people need to take everything with a grain of salt and understand the circumstances. It's not going to be black and white. It's never that way in this game. In rare occasions does it become black and white. And in those points that it becomes so apparent, then it's very obvious that we know that we need to get it fixed. Anyways, guys, that's all I have to say about it, and I hope I'll see you guys later.